This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Has Ryan Poles put enough into the offensive line? This is a question that's asked so often that today I wanted to break it down and evaluate exactly what it takes to build a great offensive line. And I want to talk about what Ryan Poles has done as general manager of the Bears as far as addressing this offensive line. I think the biggest takeaway is that great offensive lines are not built through free agency. And this is something that a lot of fans don't understand. People overrate the value of having young, cheap offensive linemen that you drafted and developed yourself. And Poles has showcased his ability to find talent on the offensive line. He identified Braxton Jones in his first draft with the Bears, and then he spent his first ever first round pick on Darnell Wright last year. On top of that, he was a key architect in building and then rebuilding the offensive line around Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. I've said it so many times, but I really trust Ryan Poles to continue building this team the right way. I don't care what anyone in the media says. I trust Ryan Poles. But it's not hard to just look at other examples. The Detroit Lions have one of the best offensive lines in football. We play them twice a year. So I want to take a minute to examine how they built their offensive line. At left tackle, they have Taylor Decker. He was a first round pick in 2016, and he spent all 8 years of his career with the Lions. He did start out at right tackle before moving to the left side later on. They had Riley Reef before that they drafted as well. The left guard is Graham Glasgow, an interesting player here. He was another guy drafted in 2016 with Taylor Decker as a third round pick. He spent his first 4 years in Detroit before they let him leave in free agency in 2020. He spent 3 years with the Broncos before coming back to Detroit last year. And then at center, they have another first round pick. Frank Ragnow was the Lions selection in 2018. He spent all 6 years of his career in Detroit. He's a three-time Pro Bowler and one of the better centers in the NFL, but people keep saying you shouldn't draft centers in the first round. Sure worked out for the Lions. And then at right guard, they have Kevin Zeitler, the only starter they have that wasn't drafted and developed by the team. However, they did have a right guard that they drafted and developed, but they let him leave in free agency this offseason. Jonah Jackson was a starter for the last 4 years at right guard for Detroit. He was another third round pick, and he made one Pro Bowl. He signed a big free agent deal with the Rams this offseason. They replaced him in free agency with Kevin Zeitler. He was a second round pick by the Bengals in 2012, and the Lions signed him to replace yet another homegrown player. And then when we get to right tackle, guess what? Another homegrown player and another first round pick invested in the offensive line. Right tackle Penei Sewell. He was taken in the top 10 and has spent all 3 years of his career in Detroit, making 2 Pro Bowls. So on their offensive line, they have 3 first round picks, 1 third round pick, and a free agent signing. But let's step back and look at it. First thing you'll notice is they've invested heavily in the offensive line. 3 first round picks and multiple mid rounders. You'll also notice they didn't build this line overnight. It took over 5 years to do so. Taylor Decker and Glasgow were drafted in 2016. Center Frank Ragnow was added 2 years later in 2018. And then it was another 3 years before they took Penei Sewell in 2021. Nothing about the transformation of the Lions' offensive line happened overnight. It took almost half a decade to put this group together. And even now, Detroit continues drafting more offensive linemen, taking 2 more guards in this year's draft. But Detroit hasn't went crazy drafting offensive linemen. They've been slow and selective throughout the process, making sure to get the right guys that fit what they are doing. That's exactly what Ryan Poles is doing. Right now, Ryan Poles has only invested 1 first round pick in this offensive line compared to the Lions' 3. However, Poles has also only made 3 picks in the first round so far, whereas the Lions have made 11 since 2016. Only 3 of those 11 went to the offensive line. You have to draft more than just offensive linemen, and the Lions built their offensive line by drafting a good player every couple of years and then developing these guys and not overspending in free agency. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's video.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
Even looking up north to the Green Bay Packers, though, they've always done a great job protecting their quarterback, and they never overspend in free agency. They've been one of the better teams at drafting and developing linemen, and if we want to actually build a really good offensive line, we should follow their example and trust in Ryan Poles. There is occasionally a really good lineman that gets to free agency and makes a difference with his new team. See Trent Williams on the 49ers or even Taron Armstead on the Dolphins, but the examples are few and far between. And if you do sign a tackle in free agency, be prepared to overpay in a big way. The bottom line is this, though. The best way to build the top offensive line is by drafting and developing players. The process takes time, but once you get it right, it's worth it in the long haul. There are no shortcuts to team building, especially on the offensive line. But even to further the point, one team that has always overspent in free agency and has tried to patch holes and build by overpaying guys is the Chicago Bears. Look at our last GMs, Jerry Angelo, Ryan Pace, and Phil Emery, all loved overspending in free agency. They loved trying to patch holes on the offensive line by throwing money at it. How did that work out? Not very well. I have no idea why fans want to continue doing the same thing that our previous GMs did that didn't have much success. Nate Davis should serve as an example as that. Those are the kind of players you get in free agency. Teams don't usually just let great players walk out the door. Usually there's some reason why they aren't being re-signed by the team. Now, of course, there are good players that get to free agency, but usually not at premium positions. Remember Orlando Pace, a Hall of Fame left tackle who the Bears signed at 34 years old to a big free agent deal? Pace is a Hall of Famer and well remembered by most, but he only played 11 games and struggled mightily with the Bears, looking like a shell of his former self. The Bears released him after just 1 season. This year's example is Robert Hunt's free agent deal, and another of numerous examples. Robert Hunt only played in 11 games last year for the Dolphins, but then he went to free agency and got a $100 million deal as a guard from the Panthers. People get overpaid in free agency, especially at premium positions. Those two factors alone make it almost impossible to completely build an offensive line through free agency. Teams don't let good offensive tackles go, and teams re-sign difference makers at premium positions. On top of that, the guys who do get to free agency get severely overpaid and rarely live up to their contracts. The best positions to sign in free agency are non-premium spots. Positions like linebackers, running backs, safeties, and then sometimes center and guard, but guards are starting to get overpaid a lot. But look at what Ryan Poles has signed in free agency. Linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. Running back, DeAndre Swift. Safety, Kevin Byard. Guard, Nate Davis. Center, Coleman Shelton. If you pay attention, Ryan Poles is building this team the right way, drafting premium positions in the draft, and then finding values in free agency. On top of that, he made one of the best trades in NFL history last year, fleecing the Carolina Panthers. You have to have a little bit of patience, but he is fixing this offensive line. Could he have taken another offensive tackle instead of Rome Odunze, or even traded down and acquired more picks? Yes, he could have. But Rome Odunze was the number 2 player on their draft board. Ryan Poles is going to have more opportunities down the line to invest in the front 5. But I think Ryan Poles is building this team better than any other GM could have, or better than I could have myself. Maybe he could have put a little bit more into the offensive line, but to me, he's done a tremendous job of completely overhauling the entire roster. It takes years to build a really good offensive line, and so far, Ryan Poles' draft picks look a lot better than his free agent signings. Just another point here. Ryan Poles has drafted Darnell Wright, Braxton Jones, and Karan Amegaji. as well as Ja'Tyree Carter. In free agency, he signed Nate Davis, Lucas Patrick, and Coleman Shelton. I know fans want Poles to do it all every offseason, but he is slowly building this offensive line, and to me, I believe he's doing it the right way. And in free agency, he's not overspending. He's signing value players. That's how you keep guys like DJ Moore and not have to trade your wide receivers away like some of these other teams. Pay attention to what Ryan Poles is doing. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Click the link in the description below to get 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Stay tuned. I have a ton more content on the way. Please remember to hit that like button for me. And until next time, bear down.